I gave my daughter $1 million villa as a wedding gift. I thought I was giving her a future, until her fiancé's family marched in, claimed the master bedroom, and called her the live-in maid. I stayed silent, until one sentence changed everything. They never saw it coming, and they never recovered from what came next. The golden sunlight hit the villa's facade like a spotlight on stage, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. From the marble entrance to the wrought iron balcony, everything about the house screamed celebration. White drapes fluttered in the breeze, tables were set with crystal glasses and blush roses, laughter floated through the air, guests mingled in designer outfits, a string quartet played softly near the koi pond, and I stood at the edge of it all, watching my daughter beam in her pale lavender dress. Ava had always been elegant without trying, the kind of woman who made grace look effortless. When she'd told us she was getting married, Thomas and I hadn't hesitated. We gifted her the villa, not a down payment, not a rental, a gift, a clean slate, a shield against struggle, something permanent in a world that offered women too many compromises. At least, that's what I thought. The event was meant to be a housewarming/engagement celebration. Ava wanted to keep things small, tasteful, but the moment Colin arrived, everything changed. He didn't arrive alone. 6 SUVs pulled into the circular driveway like a military convoy. Out spilled his parents, his older brother Travis, Travis's wife Jenna, their toddler son, and 2 family friends. They walked straight into the house like they owned it. No greetings, no glances, just the screech of suitcase wheels across polished floors. My stomach dropped. "Hey," Ava whispered as she passed me, her smile faltering. "They weren't supposed to move in today." I reached for her hand. "What do you mean, move in?" She shook her head. "They're just staying for a few days until they find a place. Colin swore it was temporary." The double doors opened wide, and there she was, Colin's mother. In a bold leopard print caftan and platform wedges, her eyes swept the foyer with an expression of visible disapproval. "Bit small, isn't it?" she muttered. "No grand staircase?" Colin trailed behind her, laughing awkwardly. "Mom, come on, it's not a palace, but it's nice." She ignored him, snapping her fingers toward the hallway. "Travis, check out the upstairs. I want the room with the soaking tub. This place better have decent water pressure." Then her eyes landed on Ava. "Oh, sweetheart," she said in a syrupy tone. "Do make sure our luggage goes to the master suite. We're exhausted." Ava blinked. I was going to stay there." Colin's mother's smile never reached her eyes. "Don't be silly. You two aren't married yet. Wouldn't be proper." Colin said nothing, just rubbed the back of his neck and looked at the floor. My jaw tightened. They moved like locusts, trampling space, overtaking rooms, giving orders like they were checking into a hotel. Travis opened the fridge, sneering at the imported juices. Jenna walked barefoot on the Persian rugs. Colin's father lit a cigar on the balcony, ash drifting toward the hydrangeas I had hand-planted the week before. By the time evening fell, Ava looked like a ghost in her own home. That was when it happened. Dinner had barely been served when Colin's mother clinked her glass with a butter knife and stood. "I just want to say," she began, all eyes on her, "how generous Ava's family has been. This villa is a gift, and we're grateful. And to make things fair, we've all agreed that Travis and Jenna will be moving in permanently. Their lease is up, and it just makes sense to keep the family together." Silence. She continued, "We'll designate rooms tonight. Ava can take the guest wing, and once she and Colin are officially married, maybe we'll let them use the master bedroom again." I stood up slowly. Thomas reached for my hand, but I pulled it back. "No," I said quietly. Everyone turned to me. "No?" Colin's mother echoed, blinking. I looked at Ava. Her eyes brimmed with silent apology. Her knuckles were white around the fork in her hand. I turned back to Colin's mother, smiled, cold and clear. "I think you misunderstood something," I said, and then I delivered the line that would haunt them for years. "This villa has one owner, and it sure as hell isn't anyone named Miller The night after the dinner, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, replaying every moment. Colin's mother declaring room assignments like a war general, Travis and Jenna unpacking their boxes without permission, and Ava, my daughter, paralyzed in her own dining room, a hostage to politeness. And underneath it all, one question pulsed like a migraine. How did we let this happen? The truth was, we saw the signs long before they ever stepped foot into that villa. When Ava first introduced us to Colin, he seemed unremarkable in a safe way, respectful, soft-spoken. He worked in IT support for a small company that seemed to always be restructuring. Ava, of course, was a rising consultant with a portfolio people twice her age would envy. But she downplayed that. She always downplayed herself. The first real warning came during the second dinner they ever had with us. We were seated at a quiet bistro, the kind with warm lighting and subtle jazz, when Colin looked around and muttered, "Places like this are overrated. You're just paying for candlelight and fancy plates." Ava had laughed it off, her hand brushing his under the table. "He's just practical," she said. Practical. That word became her defense for everything. When he forgot her birthday and claimed gifts were a commercial trap, she said he was practical. When he insisted they split gas every time she drove him to work, she said he was practical. When he criticized her spending on skincare, calling it capitalist nonsense, she said he was being real. The only time she slipped, just once, was 6 months before the engagement. She came home early, collapsed on the couch, and said, "I think Colin resents me." I remember pausing mid-stir at the stove. "Why would he resent you?" She didn't look at me when she replied, "Because I can afford things he can't. Because I never struggle the way he does." I turned off the burner. "You're not supposed to shrink yourself to make someone else feel bigger, Ava." "I know," she said, but her eyes were far away. "But I love him, and he tries." That's when I knew she was caught in the quiet quicksand of emotional imbalance, the kind where love feels like a job you're failing at, even as you give everything to keep it alive. Thomas wasn't convinced either. "He's not a loud man, my husband. He's a builder, both literally and metaphorically, the kind who pours himself into drywall finishes and rooftop angles as if they're declarations of love." When we told him we were considering gifting Ava a home, just something to give her a head start, he didn't flinch. He designed it himself, picked out the beams, studied sunlight angles, tested doorknob finishes like he was choosing diamonds. Every inch of that villa had his fingerprint. "You're going overboard," I teased once as he examined marble samples under different lighting. He just looked at me and said, "I want her to feel proud when she walks through the door, like she earned it, even if it was gifted." Ava cried when she saw the villa, cried so hard she had to sit down on the front steps, laughing through the tears. "Are you sure?" she asked over and over. "This is too much." "It's never too much when it comes to giving your child safety," I said. But that safety turned into a battleground the moment Colin's family entered it. We knew Colin didn't contribute to the house, not a dime. Ava insisted he had offered, but his savings were tied up. She even covered the engagement ring herself, buying it discreetly and claiming it was a family heirloom so we wouldn't ask questions. Ava didn't want us to think less of him, but what she didn't see was how little he thought of her sacrifice. When Thomas and I learned the truth, we decided not to push. We wanted to believe love would balance it all out, that maybe Ava's patience would inspire Colin to grow. But now I saw it clearly. He hadn't just failed to grow, he'd rotted inward. And the family that birthed him came trailing the same entitlement, like a disease passed down through generations. They didn't want Ava. They wanted what Ava had. They didn't see her as a woman. They saw her as a convenience. And somewhere in the silence, Ava had convinced herself that if she just kept folding herself smaller, they'd eventually make room for her. But love doesn't require disappearing. It doesn't demand that you let strangers call your kitchen communal space. It doesn't tell you to give up the master bedroom in your own home because you haven't earned it yet. I looked at Thomas that night as he read silently in bed, glasses slipping down his nose. "We should have stepped in sooner," I whispered. He didn't look up. "She needed to see it for herself." "Do you think she sees it now?" He turned a page, then finally met my eyes. "She saw it the moment you said the villa doesn't belong to anyone named Miller." The next morning, the house no longer felt like ours. Curtains had been drawn shut in rooms that once welcomed sunlight. The soft scent of vanilla candles had been replaced with something heavier, frying oil, cologne, and damp socks. The villa groaned under unfamiliar weight. A child's tablet blasted cartoons from the guest wing, and somewhere near the living room, someone was hammering a nail into a wall that was never theirs. I found Ava in the kitchen, barefoot, staring at the untouched espresso machine. "They're rearranging furniture," she said quietly. "Travis said the living room couch isn't ergonomic enough." She didn't look at me. She just stood there, fingers curling around the marble counter. "I told Colin it was temporary," she continued, "but now they've unpacked everything. Jenna installed a baby gate at the stairs. They ordered grocery deliveries without asking." I placed a hand on her shoulder. "You know what this is, Ava." "I know," she whispered. I didn't expect it so fast." Upstairs, Colin's mother was on speakerphone, her voice slicing through the hallway like an axe. Yes. Tell the movers it's a large property. We'll need all the bedroom sets." "Oh, and the old credenza, too, for Travis's study." "Study?" I headed toward the sound, Ava trailing behind me. "We found her in the master bedroom, our master bedroom, the one Thomas had hand-stained with walnut varnish, where the headboard had been custom-built for Ava's frame." Boxes were everywhere. Mrs. Miller was on the bed, shoes on the duvet, tapping on a tablet. Mr. Miller was in the ensuite bathroom, humming as he measured something on the counter with a metal tape. "Perfect space for my electric shaver," he muttered. Ava cleared her throat. "This is our bedroom." Mrs. Miller didn't even glance up. "You'll have it back, after marriage. Until then, it's family first. You're young. You can adapt." I stepped forward, steady and calm. This room was designed for Ava. Every detail, lighting, acoustics, layout. You don't get to override that. Mrs. Miller clicked her tongue. "Design all you want. You can't stop family from living like family." Then her voice dropped, low and smirking. "Unless you're planning to evict us?" Ava's lips parted, stunned. And that's when we heard it, Colin's voice down the hall. "No, yeah, it's her house on paper," he was saying on the phone. "But let's be honest, it's basically ours now. My parents are settling in. It's not like she'll kick out a baby and his grandparents." There was a pause. He laughed. "No prenup. She wouldn't even let me offer. Too romantic for that." Something inside Ava shifted. I could see it in the way her jaw tightened, the way her eyes stilled. We moved silently down the hall, following the voice to the small home office. Colin sat at the desk, legs propped on a box of tax files, phone pressed to his cheek. He didn't see us at first. "Honestly, once we have the deed moved, I think Travis should manage it," he said. "He's better with paperwork. I mean, Ava won't fight us. She's all heart, no teeth." The call ended. Ava's voice, when it came, was ice. "Move the deed?" Colin jerked, eyes wide. "Ava, I didn't know you—" She stepped forward. "You were going to transfer ownership to your brother?" "It's not like that," he stammered. It's logistics, legal stuff, to make taxes easier." "Right," she said, "because the best way to handle taxes is to steal a house." Colin rose, hands open. "Babe, listen, my parents just want stability. Travis and Jenna are having another kid. We all agreed it's best for everyone." "Everyone but me." His face tightened. "Why are you being so dramatic? This is what families do. They share. You're the one making this ugly." I could see the realization slicing into her. Slow, cruel, undeniable. This wasn't love. This was orchestration. They hadn't fallen into the villa. They had planned it. Quietly. Strategically. With just enough charm to keep her quiet until the ink dried. That night, I found Ava sitting in the master closet. The lights were off. She held a photo in her lap, one from the house's ribbon-cutting day. She looked happy in it, untouched. "They saw me coming a mile away," she murmured. "No," I said, kneeling beside her. "They thought they saw someone they could use. That's not the same." She turned to me slowly, her voice low. "They said I have no teeth." I smiled. "Then it's time you showed them your bite." Dinner that night was silent, not awkward, not tense, just silent, like the air had been vacuumed from the villa. The long dining table, once meant for elegant brunches and laughter-filled evenings, now played host to a silent battlefield. Colin's parents took their usual seats, his mother at the head, as if she were queen. Travis spoon-fed his toddler mashed peas while Jenna scrolled through her phone. Colin sat beside Ava, but they didn't touch. Not a brush of fingers, not a shared glance. Just two people divided by a canyon of betrayal. Thomas and I watched. We weren't going to step in. Not yet. Ava had told us to wait. She had a plan. Colin's father was the first to break the quiet. He belched, loud and unapologetic, and then smacked his lips. "Food's decent tonight," he said, wiping his mouth with the tablecloth. "It's catered," Ava replied coolly, not looking up. "I canceled the chef after someone said his cooking was pretentious garbage." Mrs. Miller laughed. "Good. We prefer simple food. None of that artistic drizzle nonsense. Just real meals. Salt, meat, fat. Like people used to eat before everyone got soft." Travis chimed in, mouth full. "Jenna made her famous pork shoulder. We should stockpile it in the basement freezer. This place has one, right?" "We're not stocking anything," Ava said, voice sharp. "This isn't a boarding house." Mrs. Miller's smile didn't falter, but her eyes narrowed. "Sweetheart, you've always been high-strung. Relax a little. Family living means shared space, shared duties. I assumed you'd handle the chores, the cleaning, laundry, grocery runs, basic things a wife should do." Colin shifted. "Mom—" "No," Ava cut in. "Let her finish. I'm curious what she thinks I signed up for." Mrs. Miller leaned back, unbothered. "You wanted to marry into our family. That means honoring how we live. We take care of our own. You don't get to claim territory just because your mommy wrote a check." Ava pushed her plate away. "I didn't ask for your son's hand so I could play maid while you redecorate my house with your entitlement." Colin snapped. "Ava, enough!" "No," she said firmly, standing. "You sit down." He froze. "You let your family march into my life, into my home, without so much as asking. You said it was temporary. You lied. It was temporary. And now you're trying to transfer the deed behind my back? You let them plan a future that never involved me at all." Thomas placed his fork down, quietly, deliberately. "I told you," Mrs. Miller said coolly. "This is how families work. Travis and Jenna gave up their lease. We made sacrifices too." "You made assumptions," Ava fired back. "And now it's time to correct them." Mr. Miller stood up, cigarette already in hand. "Listen here, Missy." Thomas stood too. "Sit," he said, voice calm but thunderous. Mr. Miller paused, flicked his lighter, then sat back down. "You think you can evict us?" Travis muttered. "This is your future family." "No," Ava said. "You're squatters. Parasites." Colin turned red. "You're blowing this out of proportion. We're engaged. Everything that's mine will be yours." "And everything that's mine?" she asked. "Did you think you could just take it?" Mrs. Miller scoffed. "You'd really kick a child out of a home? That baby calls this place home now. Then his parents better find a new one." Gasps. Travis dropped his fork. "You can't just throw us out." "I can," Ava said. "And I will." Colin slammed his hand on the table. "Ava, if you do this, we're done." She turned to him slowly. "We were done the moment you tried to give my house away." And then, quietly, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "This is a formal notice. You and your family have 72 hours to vacate the premises. After that, you will be removed legally." Mrs. Miller stood, face twisted. "You can't do this." Ava's voice was steel. "I just did." I stood at the window long after everyone else had gone to bed. Outside, the garden lights flickered softly against the stone path. The hydrangeas swayed with the wind, whispering secrets only women like me knew. Secrets of enduring what we shouldn't have had to endure. Of holding your breath for years and calling it grace. Of handing your daughter a kingdom and praying she wouldn't crown a tyrant. I thought of my own mother then. A woman with tired hands and a voice that never rose above polite. She raised me to believe endurance was the highest virtue. That silence in the face of disrespect was the mark of a good woman, that to keep peace in the family, we must learn to eat shame with a smile. When my father would disappear for days, claiming business trips that smelled like whiskey and unfamiliar perfume, my mother would just wash the sheets, iron his shirts, and greet him with a quiet nod. Once, when I was 17, I asked her why she never left. Her answer was soft but final. Because dignity is expensive. She didn't mean financially. She meant the kind of dignity that requires you to walk away even when it costs you love, security, family approval, the kind that leaves you alone and cold in a one-bedroom apartment, wondering if you made a mistake. She couldn't afford it, so she stayed. I promised myself I wouldn't repeat that cycle, that I would raise Ava differently. But life doesn't hand you trauma in neat little boxes. It passes down like water, absorbed through the skin, invisible until the weight begins to drown you. When Ava was little, she was sunshine, curious, assertive, unafraid to speak her mind. But slowly, the world dimmed her brilliance. First, it was school, being told she was too bossy for speaking up, too sensitive for crying when a teacher mocked her handwriting. Then it was her first boyfriend in college, a boy who called her a handful when she challenged him, who praised other girls for being low maintenance. Each time, I saw her shrink a little more. Each time, I bit my tongue. Was I teaching her patience? Or was I, like my mother, reinforcing the idea that love had to be earned through suffering? When she met Colin, she was already halfway gone. She introduced him to us with nervous pride, her voice too high, her smile too wide. "He's not flashy," she said quickly, anticipating judgment, "but he's grounded, practical." Practical, the word she had learned to use instead of controlling, insecure, or stingy. We watched as she began molding herself to fit the contours of his comfort. He didn't like when she dressed up, so she started wearing neutrals. He thought skincare was vain, so she stopped buying serums. He believed couple finances should be equal, so she footed most of their bills to keep the math tidy, and we stayed silent, hoping she'd find her footing on her own. But silence isn't always grace. Sometimes it's betrayal dressed in gentleness. It wasn't until Thomas built that villa brick by brick, hand-picking finishes and tiling Ava's bathroom himself, that I realized what we were really trying to do. We weren't just giving her a house, we were giving her an escape route, a home of her own to run back to, in case the man she chose turned out to be the wrong one. And now, that investment, of money, of faith, of love, had become a battleground. Earlier that afternoon, while Ava was consulting the lawyer about the eviction notice, I wandered upstairs to clear my head. That's when I found her suitcase. Still packed, still zipped. She hadn't fully unpacked since moving in. She'd been living in a house she called hers, but prepared to leave at any moment. And when I opened her vanity drawer, I found a small velvet box. Inside was the engagement ring, not from Colin, from her. The receipt was still folded underneath, quietly dated 6 months before he proposed. She'd bought it, picked it, hid it. All so she could pretend he had given her something he never intended to. That broke me. Because it wasn't just a ring. It was a symbol of how far she'd go to keep pretending this was love. How far she'd bend to protect the illusion. And it made me furious, not at her, but at myself. For the times I said, "Give him a chance," instead of, "Don't let him take yours." For every warning I swallowed, thinking I was being supportive. That night, Ava sat with me on the back patio. We didn't talk about the Millers. We didn't talk about Colin. We talked about my mother. and her mother, and all the women who had survived by holding their breath. I wanted to be different, Ava said. I thought if I gave enough, I could build something real. You were different, I said. You just didn't know when to stop giving. She nodded slowly. I think I do now. And in that moment I saw it, the full circle breaking, generations of silence finally shattered, and in its place, something new, something stronger, something unshakably hers. They were gone by morning, but only from the kitchen. Colin's family had retreated upstairs, sulking behind closed doors, speaking in muffled tones. But their boxes remained, their scent still clinging to the hallway rugs. The home felt paused, like a tense breath, not yet exhaled. But Ava, she had changed. She came downstairs in a sharp black blouse, hair pulled back, heels clicking with purpose. A folder in her hand, a calmness on her face that didn't belong to someone who was afraid. It belonged to someone who had already decided. They're going to push back, I warned gently. She didn't blink. Let them. In the dining room, Thomas had laid out coffee and toast, as if routine could shield the house from the war brewing upstairs. But nothing could mute the sound of Travis stomping down the stairs, holding his phone like a weapon. This is illegal, he announced. You can't evict a family without proper cause. You're not family, Ava said, flipping open the folder. You're house guests, uninvited ones, and this is a legal notice to vacate. Travis scoffed. We've established residency. Jenna changed her address yesterday. Changing your address doesn't change the law, Ava replied coldly. And don't think for a second I won't take this to court. Colin entered then, still in sweatpants, eyes puffy from sleep. Ava, what the hell is going on? What should have happened weeks ago, she said. He looked at her like a stranger, like someone who had expected a rug under his feet and was now stunned to find bare floor. We're supposed to be a team, he said. She laughed, quiet, almost pitying. A team doesn't steal behind each other's backs. Look, he said, stepping forward, hands raised. Maybe things got out of hand. My parents just wanted to help. They thought wrong, Ava snapped. And you? You let them walk all over me. You let them insult my parents, my work, my value, and you said nothing. I didn't want to take sides, he said weakly. You had a side, she shot back. You just didn't choose it. Mrs. Miller appeared at the stairs then, robe fluttering behind her like a villain in a melodrama. So this is how you repay us? She hissed. After all the trouble we went through to welcome you into our family? You never welcomed me, Ava said, eyes narrowing. You tried to annex me. Mrs. Miller's lips curled. You think you'll find better than my son? A woman like you? You're not as special as you think. Thomas stood then, voice low and steady. Leave, before I make it less polite. Mr. Miller shuffled in, trying to diffuse the situation, but one look at Ava's face told him there would be no peacekeeping today. Colin tried once more, voice breaking slightly. Ava, don't do this. Don't throw us away over a misunderstanding. She walked toward him slowly. Do you remember, she asked, when we first met? You told me you loved how driven I was, how independent. He nodded. And then little by little, you made me feel like those things were flaws. You called me materialistic, high maintenance, cold. That's not what I meant. But it's what you said, over and over, until I stopped buying things I liked, until I apologized for having ambition, until I became small enough for your comfort. Tears shimmered in her eyes but never fell. I was ready to marry you, Colin, even after the red flags, even after your family moved in like this was a free hotel. But now, I wouldn't take you back if this house burned down and you were the only one left holding the keys. Colin's jaw clenched. You think you're better than us? I know I deserve better than this. He reached for her hand. She didn't move. You're making a mistake, he said softly. You're going to regret this. She leaned in slightly, her voice like glass. You don't get to threaten me anymore. Not with guilt, not with silence, not with poverty dressed up as principle. You want someone who will shrink herself into a manageable box? Go look somewhere else. And just like that, the door closed. Not literally, not yet, but emotionally, completely. She had rejected not just Colin, she had rejected every version of herself that once whispered, just stay, just adapt, just be quiet and make it work. She was done being quiet. That evening, the movers arrived. Colin's family tried to delay, begged for extensions, made threats, but the lease document Thomas had drawn up and the police presence Ava had discreetly arranged sealed the deal. By dusk, they were gone. The house exhaled. Ava sat on the balcony, barefoot, wine glass in hand. The air was crisp. Her voice was tired, but free. Mom? Yes? If I ever forget this feeling, she said softly, remind me. I reached over, brushing a hand over hers. You won't, but I will. The silence after eviction should have been enough. But entitlement doesn't die quietly. It sputters, claws, drags itself back for one last spectacle. 3 days after the Millers left the villa, a letter arrived. Not handwritten. Not personal. A formal envelope addressed in block letters. To Ava Dawson, outstanding reimbursements. URGENT. Inside was a spreadsheet. A literal spreadsheet. Every date, every transaction, every dollar Colin had ever spent on Ava. From a $12 Uber ride to a shared appetizer at a chain restaurant, meticulously itemized like she was a debtor in his accounting system. Colin's note was short. Since you ended the engagement, it's only fair you cover your half of what I invested in this relationship. Please remit $2,984.67. Let's part respectfully. Respectfully? Thomas nearly choked on his coffee when he read it. You mean to tell me the man who let his family steal furniture is now billing her for Thai takeout? Ava didn't laugh. She was too tired, too hurt. Because it wasn't about the money. It was about the message underneath. You owe me. You always did. We drafted a short response, one that acknowledged receipt and advised Colin to direct all future correspondence through legal counsel. We thought that would be the end. We underestimated how low desperation could go. That Friday, Ava walked into her office and found a crowd gathered in the lobby. Not a protest, not a party, a performance. There stood Mrs. Miller, loud, furious, and uninvited, holding up the spreadsheet like a protest sign. She used my son, she cried to the receptionist, the security guard, the mailman, anyone who would listen. He paid for everything. She took advantage of a good man and then threw him out. Ava's co-workers looked on, confused. Isn't she the one who owns the villa? Didn't the fiancé move in with his whole family? I thought he was the leech. Ava didn't engage. She walked past them like smoke, untouchable. She called security, had them escorted out. But that weekend, the story went online. Colin, or one of his enablers, created a burner account on social media and uploaded edited clips from their time together. Photos of gifts Ava gave, voice recordings stripped of context, a caption that read, "When gold diggers wear Prada, but forget who paid for dinner." It went viral. Not on a grand scale, just enough to sting. Enough that Ava's inbox filled with strangers demanding to know if she used her ex, if she was another privileged brat playing victim. She came home that night quieter than usual. She didn't cry, didn't rage. She just sat at the kitchen counter and stared at the wall. Do you want to fight back? I asked her. Go public with the receipts? The real story? No, she said. I want it over. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Because the next blow came from the place Colin had always tried to impress, his job. He had once bragged about a promotion, about how he was indispensable. That illusion shattered when Ava's legal team, calmly, professionally, sent a letter to Colin's employer, informing them of the false campaign and harassment. We weren't looking to sue, just to document, just to protect. But the company acted faster than we expected. They fired him. Not because of the breakup, not because of the letter, but because of the spreadsheet. Apparently, he'd submitted it to HR too, claiming emotional damages and demanding their internal legal team help him recover the amount. They declined. He insisted, he pushed. They let him go. Word spread. Quickly. In their social circle, Colin had always been the stable one, the quiet one. His family framed Ava as the difficult woman with too many opinions and too much money. But now they saw him for what he was, a man so afraid of being overshadowed that he tried to turn affection into a financial contract. Friends stopped calling. Travis and Jenna moved back in with his in-laws out of town. Mrs. Miller tried to salvage dignity by calling Ava vindictive. But no one bought it. Because Ava hadn't posted a thing. She hadn't lashed out, hadn't retaliated. She had simply lived. Quietly. Firmly. Unapologetically. And that's what really broke them. Not a court order, not a social media war. Just the simple act of refusing to play the victim and still winning. That month, Ava dove into work with a calm I hadn't seen in her in years. She didn't hide. She didn't explain. She just built. Every deal she closed, every presentation she nailed, every client she impressed, it all became part of the new structure rising in place of what she lost. The tides had shifted, not because she forced them, but because she no longer swam against their current. She let go, and everything that wasn't real floated away. It started with a paintbrush, not a metaphor. An actual brush, thick bristled, dipped in soft blue, swiped confidently across the accent wall of the master bedroom. Ava didn't ask for help. She didn't hire designers this time. She did it herself. Every stroke felt like a reclamation, like she was painting over every moment someone else tried to write her life for her. The villa no longer echoed with entitlement. It whispered with possibility. She changed the locks first. Then the curtains. Then the energy. Gone were the sterile silvers and minimal grays Colin had insisted were more modern. In came warm textures, soft rugs, little imperfections that felt like breath. She added a breakfast nook by the sunroom, replanted the garden with flowers that bloomed recklessly, laughed when the wind knocked over the new porch lanterns. It was slow, but it was hers. On weekends, she started inviting people over again, just a few friends, real ones. They'd sip coffee on the balcony, talk about things that weren't tied to survival, travel, art, recipes that never quite turned out right. They brought their dogs. One even brought a rescue rabbit in a harness. Ava loved it. "I forgot how much space I have," she said one Sunday, looking around the garden. "You never lost it," I replied. "You just stopped believing it was yours." Her work flourished, too. She began saying no more often, without guilt. She took risks. Applied for a regional project lead position that no one expected her to get. Presented to boardrooms with poise that made executives lean in, not just listen. Then came the business conference. She almost didn't go. Said she felt too visible after the online drama. But I nudged her. "You don't rebuild by hiding," I told her. "You do it by showing up before you feel ready." So she went, and that's where she met Gabriel. No grand introduction, no romantic comedy music cue. Just two people who reached for the same brochure at a vendor booth and started laughing over the awkwardness. He was an architect, quiet, intuitive, dressed in linen like he belonged to the sea. They talked about sustainable building models, the flaws in modern floor plans, and then somehow, poetry. Ava came home that night lighter, not giddy, not smitten, just light. Over the next few weeks, they crossed paths again, at panels, networking mixers, volunteer builds. Nothing forced, no expectations. He never asked where she lived, never Googled her, never hinted that he wanted more. And that's what made Ava curious, because for once, a man didn't see her as a project, a meal ticket, or a conquest. He saw her as a peer, a person, a woman with her own orbit. They started grabbing coffee, sitting in parks, talking about things that mattered and things that didn't. One evening, he picked her up in a car that clearly needed new brakes, and apologized for the dust on the dashboard. I live in my work van, he joked. It's half mobile office, half existential crisis. Ava laughed harder than she had in months. They drove to a lakeside pop-up gallery that showcased recycled material sculptures, strolled between towering art made from discarded washing machines and melted-down car parts. I like this one, Gabriel said, pointing to a spiraled structure of rusted chains. It looks heavy, but it's hollow inside, kind of like trauma, right? Ava turned to him, quiet for a moment. Or like love, she said, when you give it to the wrong people. He didn't ask what she meant. He just nodded, and they kept walking. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was real. And after everything she'd endured, Ava didn't need fireworks. She needed silence that didn't sting. That night, she came home to a voicemail from Colin. Not angry, not desperate. Just a slow, breathy, "I've been thinking. I still love you. I miss us." She didn't even hesitate. She deleted it. No tears, no questions. Just a quiet decision. She was no longer returning calls to the past. Instead, she picked up a book Gabriel had loaned her, on Japanese joinery. She read until the words blurred, curled up under the linen throw on the new couch, and drifted into the kind of sleep that doesn't come when you're sharing space with people who resent your boundaries. This was rebirth. Not dramatic, not viral, just deliberate. 1 hour at a time. One meal cooked for herself, not for approval. One mirror glance that didn't come with judgment. She was not who she had been. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't miss the girl who needed saving. The villa looked different now, not just in color or layout, but in energy. It no longer held echoes of footsteps that didn't belong or conversations that drained the air. It breathed now, warm and open. A sanctuary earned, not just inherited. Spring came early. The garden Ava designed with Gabriel was beginning to bloom, lavender and sage lining the walkway, soft moss between stones, a water feature trickling near the edge like quiet punctuation. It wasn't extravagant, it wasn't polished, but it was her. One afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the roofline, Ava called out to me from the patio. "Come see." I stepped outside. At the far end of the yard, nestled beneath the oak tree, stood a plaque, a simple copper square set into a smooth stone, etched on its surface. Some things you build to protect yourself. Others you build so you never forget how far you've come. I turned to her, blinking back tears. "It's beautiful," she nodded. It's not just a garden, it's a reminder. I knew what she meant, because even peace, once earned, needs tending. Even wholeness needs witnessing. That evening, she invited a few friends over, old colleagues, some neighbors, even her yoga instructor, who always brought extra cookies. Gabriel came too, late as usual, smudged with charcoal from a sculpture he'd been shaping all week. He brought wine. They toasted under string lights, laughed around the fire pit, shared stories that had nothing to do with survival. Later, as the guests drifted home and the candles burned low, Ava and I sat on the front steps. Just like we used to when she was little, her head on my shoulder, her knees pulled up to her chest. "I don't regret it," she said suddenly. I looked over. "Any of it?" "No," she said. "Not even Colin, not even the house drama." She paused. "It taught me the difference between giving and surrendering, between love and obligation, between someone needing you and someone respecting you." I nodded. "I used to think I was lucky to be loved at all," she continued. "Now I know I'm the one who chooses who gets to love me." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small gold keychain, the one Colin had once gifted her on their first anniversary, the only gift he ever actually paid for. She turned it over once, then dropped it into a small metal box by the door, locked it, walked away. A gesture not of hatred, but of finality. Weeks passed. Curtis, silent. His family, distant shadows. The last whisper came through a mutual friend. Colin had moved back home, was working odd jobs, and had started therapy. Ava didn't react, not because she didn't care, but because she had already closed the book. Months later, Gabriel invited her to a private design exhibition he was curating. He didn't call it a date, didn't put a label on what they were. But as they walked through rows of architectural models and sculptures, his hand brushed hers, and she didn't pull away. That night, he parked in front of the villa and turned to her. "I don't want to be another chapter you have to recover from." She smiled. "Then don't be a chapter," she said. "Be the space between them, the part where I finally breathe." He leaned in, not to kiss her, but to listen. And that was enough. The next morning, she made her bed with sunlight streaming in, brewed coffee in the kitchen she once felt excluded from, and sat by the garden with her laptop and a blank document open. The title read, "How to Reclaim What Was Always Yours." She started typing. Ava wasn't just healing, she was creating, building something from the rubble, not a revenge story, not a comeback, but a legacy. And in a quiet moment before dusk, I asked her what she thought the greatest lesson was. She smiled. "Simple," she said. "They thought they could take my house. They didn't realize I was the house. And you don't evict the foundation. This time I'm not defending the door. I am the door. And only the worthy get through."